When I bent down to pick up my phone from the car floor, I lost control and rolled over 12 times. When I came to, I was surrounded by 6 tall, bright beings. They helped me sit up and I realized I was outside my body. Then one of them said, "You are nothing like what they told you." The story you are about to hear is a true account. The names of characters and places have been changed to protect the privacy of the authors. If you believe in miracles or have experienced one, leave your opinion in the comments and subscribe. It was Christmas Eve, and I was running late to meet a client in Atlanta. I remember every detail of that night as if it were yesterday. The cold air hit my face as I drove at full speed down the highway. My heart was pounding, a mixture of adrenaline and anxiety. "Damn it," I muttered under my breath, looking at the dashboard clock. "I'm going to miss my flight if I don't hurry." That's when I made the worst decision of my life. I thought I could make a quick call to let them know I was on my way. The phone, one of those huge bag models that connected to the car's lighter, was on the floor on the passenger side. I leaned over to reach it, unbuckling my seatbelt in the process. "It'll just take a second," I told myself. But that second changed everything. As I straightened up with the phone in my hand, I saw another car's lights too close. Panic overwhelmed me. I jerked the steering wheel sharply, trying to avoid the collision. "Oh my God!" I screamed as I lost control of the vehicle. What followed was a sequence of images and sensations that were burned into my memory. The deafening screech of tires, the world spinning around me, the brutal impact against the median. I remember thinking, this is how I'm going to die. The car rolled over, crossing the central divider and the oncoming lanes. Each impact felt like a hammer blow to my body. Glass flying, metal twisting, and I was flying through the air. They say that in moments like these, your life flashes before your eyes. For me, it was more like an avalanche of regrets. I thought about my parents, about the argument we'd had that morning, about all the things I hadn't told them. "I'm sorry," I whispered as I was thrown from the vehicle. The impact against the asphalt was the last thing I felt before everything went black. They say they found me about 12 meters from the car. A miracle, according to the paramedics, that I was still alive. The following hours were a chaos of sirens, anxious voices, and pain. So much pain. I could hear fragments of conversations around me. "She's losing a lot of blood. We need to get her to the hospital right now. I don't know if she's going to make it." I wanted to tell them I was fine, that I could hear them, but my body wouldn't respond. I felt trapped in my own mind, unable to move or speak. As the ambulance raced to the hospital, I felt myself sinking deeper into darkness. The pain was fading, replaced by a strange sense of peace. Is this what dying feels like? I wondered. I had no idea that what I was about to experience would change my life forever. That this accident, which should have been the end of my story, would actually be the beginning of something much bigger. The last thing I remember before completely losing consciousness was a soft voice whispering in my ear, "It's not your time yet, honey. You have much to do." Suddenly, the darkness dissipated. It was as if someone had turned on a blinding light. I found myself in a white, luminous room, so bright that for a moment I thought I had gone blind. I blinked several times, trying to adjust my vision. "Where am I?" I mumbled, confused. That's when I saw them. 6 tall, radiant beings surrounded me. I can't describe them as normal people. They were more like columns of light with vaguely human forms. Their presence radiated a warmth and peace I had never experienced before. One of them approached and extended what appeared to be a hand. "Welcome," it said in a voice that I felt throughout my entire being rather than heard. Instinctively, I tried to sit up. To my surprise, 2 of these beings slid their hands under me, helping me up with incredible gentleness and delicacy. It was at that moment when I realized I wasn't in my physical body. I felt light, as if I were made of air and light. Am I dead?" I asked, surprised I could speak without moving my lips. The being who had greeted me emitted something like a soft laugh. "You're in a space between worlds," it responded. "Neither alive nor dead, but in a state of transition." I looked around amazed. The room seemed to have no limits. It extended infinitely in all directions. And these beings, they emanated such pure and powerful love that I felt overwhelmed. Without thinking, I launched myself to hug the nearest being. To my surprise, instead of passing through it, I felt a warm and comforting embrace. It was like immersing myself in an ocean of unconditional love. All my worries, fears, and pain vanished in that instant. "My child," one of them said with a voice that reminded me of my grandmother, "you have no idea how loved you are." Tears of joy and relief ran down my cheeks, or at least, that's how it felt. "But why?" I sobbed. "I've made so many mistakes. I've hurt so many people. I don't deserve." Before I could finish, another being interrupted me. Its voice was firm but full of compassion. "Listen to me well," it said. "Everything they've told you about yourself, all those labels and judgments, are nothing but illusions." But I tried to protest. "No, my child," a third being intervened. "You are not your mistakes. You are not your fears. You are not what others say about you. You are pure love, just like all beings." Their words resonated in the depths of my being. It was as if every cell in my body, or whatever I had in that state, vibrated with that truth. "How is it possible?" I asked, still incredulous. "I've done terrible things. I've lied, I've cheated." The first being who had greeted me came even closer. Its light was so intense it almost hurt to look at directly. "Those actions are the result of fear and forgetfulness," it explained. "But beneath all that, your essence remains pure. It always has been and always will be." They then showed me images of my life. I saw moments of kindness I had forgotten, acts of love I hadn't valued. I also saw my mistakes, but from a completely different perspective. There was no judgment, only understanding and compassion. "Each experience, each decision, has brought you to this moment," said another being. "Not to be judged, but to remember who you really are." I felt as if an enormous weight lifted from my shoulders. For the first time in my life, I felt completely accepted and loved, without conditions or expectations. "And now what?" I asked, feeling like a small child seeking guidance. The beings looked at each other, as if having a silent conversation. Finally, one of them spoke. "You have a decision to make," it said. "But first, there's something you must see." At that moment, I felt as if I were rising. The white room disappeared and I found myself floating above my body. I was in a hospital room, connected to machines and tubes. The scene was surreal. "Look," said one of the beings, pointing toward the door. I saw my mother enter, her eyes swollen from crying. She approached my lifeless body and took my hand. "My girl," she whispered between sobs. "Please come back to us. We need you." I felt her pain as if it were my own. It was heartbreaking. "You see," said the being beside me, "your life touches many others. Each decision, each action, has an impact beyond what you can imagine." As I watched my mother, I understood that my journey wasn't over yet. I had much to learn, much to experience, and above all, much love to give. "I'm ready," I said, feeling a new determination. "I want to go back. I want to really live this time." The beings nodded in approval. "Remember," they said in unison, "you are love. Never forget that." Floating in the corner of the hospital room, I felt like an invisible spectator to my own tragedy. The smell of disinfectant and the constant hum of machines created a surreal atmosphere. My body lay motionless in the bed, an empty shell connected to endless tubes and wires. Is that really me? I wondered, feeling a mixture of fascination and horror. It was then that the door opened slowly. My heart, or whatever I had in that state, skipped a beat when I saw my mother enter. Her face, normally full of life and joy, was haggard with exhaustion and worry. She walked as if carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. "Oh, Mama," I whispered, though I knew she couldn't hear me. She approached the bed with hesitant steps. For a moment, she stood there, staring at me fixedly, as if she couldn't believe her eyes. Then, with an almost reverential movement, she took my lifeless hand in hers. "My girl," she said with a broken voice. "My baby." Tears began to roll down her cheeks, and I felt as if each one was a dagger in my heart. I wanted to comfort her, tell her I was okay, not to worry, but I was trapped in this state, unable to do anything but observe. "Why, dear God," my mother sobbed, pressing my hand against her chest. Why my daughter? She has her whole life ahead of her. At that moment, something extraordinary happened. I could feel every emotion my mother was experiencing. It was as if our hearts were connected by an invisible thread. The pain, the anguish, the fear, it all hit me like an avalanche. "Mom, I'm so sorry," I said, though I knew my words were lost in the void. "I didn't want to cause you so much pain." It was then that I understood something fundamental. Our actions have a much greater impact than we imagine. Every decision we make, every word we say, creates ripples that extend far beyond ourselves. I saw images of my life pass before my eyes. Moments of joy shared with my family, but also arguments and hurtful words that I now deeply regretted. How many times had I hurt my loved ones without realizing it? If I could go back, I thought, I would do things so differently. My mother was still there, caressing my face tenderly. "Remember when you were little," she said through tears, "and I would sing you to sleep? Come on, my love, wake up. Sing with me." She began to hum a lullaby that I recognized immediately. It was the same one she used to sing to me when I had nightmares as a child. The melody filled the room, charged with love and nostalgia. I felt a tightness in my chest. How could I have been so blind? How could I not see all the love that surrounded me? At that moment, I had a vision. I saw my life as a bright light in the midst of a vast network of other lights. Each light represented a life, and they were all connected by luminous threads. It was like seeing a city from the sky on a clear night. "We're like the lights of a city," I murmured, amazed. I understood that every action, every thought, every emotion sent waves through that network. When one light went out or flickered, it affected all the others around it. My light, I thought with horror, is about to go out. I could see how my accident had created a kind of short circuit in the network. My mother's pain spread, affecting my father, my siblings, my friends. It was like an expanding wave of suffering. "It can't end like this," I told myself. "I have to go back. I have to fix this." I looked at my mother one more time. She was still singing, her voice broken by crying, but still full of love. At that moment, I made a decision. "I'm going to fight," I promised. "I'm going to come back and be the daughter you deserve. I'm going to be a better person." I felt a force pulling at me, as if the universe itself was responding to my determination. Before I could understand what was happening, I found myself being dragged back into my body. The last thing I heard before sinking into unconsciousness was my mother's voice, singing with renewed hope, "Sleep, my child. Sleep, my love." Suddenly, I found myself in a place that defied all description. It was like being at the center of a galaxy and in the heart of an atom at the same time. Around me, 12 luminous beings formed a perfect circle. Their presence was overwhelming, emanating a wisdom and power that made me feel small and insignificant. "Where am I?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper in the vastness of space. One of the beings, whose light seemed more intense than the others, spoke. Their voice resonated not in my ears, but in every fiber of my being. "You are in the council, child," they said. "This is where the most important decisions of the universe are made." I felt a shiver run through my body. I wasn't sure what form I had in this place anymore. What decisions?" I managed to ask. Another being, whose light seemed to dance with colors I had never seen before, responded, "We are here to decide your fate, little one." The gravity of the situation hit me like a wave. These beings were debating about my life, about whether I should return or not. "But why me?" I exclaimed. "I'm just a girl from Kansas. I'm nobody special." A soft laugh, like the tinkling of crystal bells, filled the space. "Every soul is special," said a third being. "Every life has a purpose in the great tapestry of the universe." The beings began to speak among themselves in a language I couldn't understand, but that somehow resonated within me. It was as if they were weighing every aspect of my existence. "She has made mistakes," said one. "As have we all," replied another. "But she has potential," argued a third. "And if she doesn't fulfill it," questioned another. The debate continued, their voices rising and falling like ocean waves. I felt like a small child listening to adults discuss her future, unable to intervene but desperate to do so. "Please," I finally said, gathering all my courage. "I know I've made mistakes. I know I've hurt people, but if you give me another chance, I promise I'll do things differently. I'll be better." Silence fell over the council. All the beings stared at me intently, as if they could see into the depths of my soul. The being who had spoken first approached me. Their light was so intense I had to close my eyes. "Little one," they said with a voice that was like a warm embrace, "do you truly understand what you're asking for? Going back won't be easy. Pain, suffering, doubts, all of that will be waiting for you." I swallowed, or at least, that's what I felt I did. "I know," I replied, "but I also know there's love and beauty and the chance to make a difference. Please let me try." The beings deliberated again. This time, I could understand fragments of their conversation. "Her determination is admirable," said one. "But will it be enough?" questioned another. "Free will is a precious gift," argued a third. "We should honor it." Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the most luminous being addressed me again. "We have made a decision," they announced. "We will give you another chance, but you must understand something. Every action you take, every word you say, will have consequences. The universe is interconnected in ways you can barely imagine." I nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility on my shoulders. "Remember," they continued, "love is the most powerful force in the universe. Use it wisely." Before I could respond, I felt myself fading. The circle of beings began to blur, their lights mixing into a whirlwind of colors. "Wait," I cried. "How will I know what to do?" The voice of the luminous being resonated one last time. "Listen to your heart. There you will find all the answers." And with that, I plunged into darkness. I felt myself falling through space and time, back to my body, back to the life I had left behind. As I fell, I made a silent promise. "I won't let you down. I'll make every moment count." I didn't know what awaited me on the other side, but I was ready to face it. With love as my guide and the wisdom of the council in my heart, I knew I could overcome any obstacle. Slowly, as if emerging from the depths of a dark ocean, I began to regain consciousness. The first thing I felt was pain so intense it almost made me wish to return to the peace of the beyond. Every part of my body seemed to scream in agony. I tried to open my eyes, but my eyelids felt as if they were sealed with cement. With superhuman effort, I managed to crack them open. The light, though dim, seemed blinding. I blinked several times, trying to focus my blurry vision. Gradually, the shapes around me began to make sense. I was in a hospital room, surrounded by machines emitting constant beeps. The smell of antiseptic flooded my nostrils, making me nauseous. I moved my head slightly and felt as if 1,000 needles were piercing my neck. That's when I saw him. Patrick, my friend, sleeping uncomfortably in a chair next to my bed. His face showed signs of exhaustion, with deep dark circles and stubble. I wanted to call him, tell him I was awake, but my mouth wouldn't respond. I felt something hard and metallic. With horror, I realized my jaw was immobilized. "Patrick," I tried to say, but only a muffled moan came out. I concentrated all my energy on a single thought: "Wake up, Patrick. Please wake up." As if he had heard my silent plea, Patrick stirred in the chair. His eyes opened slowly, and when they fell on me, they snapped wide open. "Oh my God. Shaw, you're awake," he exclaimed, jumping up. He approached the bed, his eyes filled with tears of joy and relief. He took my hand carefully, as if afraid he might break me. "I can't believe it," he said, his voice breaking with emotion. "The doctors," they said. "Oh, Shaw, we thought we'd lost you." I wanted to respond, to tell him I was okay, that I had returned, but the words wouldn't come out. Instead, tears began to roll down my cheeks. Patrick, interpreting my silence, began to speak quickly. "You had a terrible accident, Shaw. Your car, it rolled several times. They found you several meters away. You've been in a coma for weeks. Your parents, your friends, we've all been here, taking turns to care for you." As Patrick spoke, something strange began to happen. It was as if I could see beyond his words, beyond his tired face. I saw light, an energy emanating from him. It was the same unconditional love I had experienced in the beyond. Suddenly, everything made sense. The Celestial Council, the decision to return, The promise to live differently. It was all there in Patrick's eyes, in the love he was showing me. I tried to smile, though the pain in my jaw made it almost impossible. Patrick seemed to understand. "Don't worry," he said, gently squeezing my hand. "You don't have to speak. Just rest. I'm here with you." In that moment, I felt a wave of gratitude so intense it almost overwhelmed me. How had I not seen before how much the people around me loved me? How had I been so blind? Patrick continued talking, telling me about family visits, messages from friends, even from people I barely knew. Every word was like a balm for my wounded soul. "You know," Patrick said with a small smile, "there was a moment a few days ago when we all thought, well, that you wouldn't make it. But suddenly your vital signs improved. The doctors couldn't explain it. They said it was as if you had decided to fight." If only Patrick knew how close he was to the truth. I had fought not just against death, but against my own selfishness, my own blindness. I had returned with a purpose. As I listened to Patrick, I began to see the world in a completely new way. Every object in the room seemed to radiate its own energy. The flowers on the nightstand, the heart monitor, even the curtains. Everything seemed alive, interconnected. And Patrick, oh Patrick. His aura shone with such pure love that it almost hurt to look at him. How had I not seen it before? How had I gone through life without noticing the beauty that surrounded me? I wanted to tell Patrick all of this. I wanted to tell him about my journey, about the Celestial Council, about the decision to return. But the words remained trapped in my throat. Instead, I gathered all my strength and squeezed his hand. Our eyes met, and in that moment, I knew I didn't need words. He understood. Somehow he knew. "It's okay, Shah," he said softly. "Take your time. We're here with you. We're all here." I closed my eyes, overwhelmed by emotion. The physical pain was still there, but now there was something more, a certainty, an inner peace I had never experienced before. The days following my awakening were a roller coaster of emotions and sensations. While my body struggled to recover, my mind tried to process everything I had experienced. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw flashes of the beyond, the beings of light, the Celestial Council, the interconnected web of lives. One afternoon, when the Kansas sun painted the hospital room golden, my dad entered. His face, usually stoic, showed signs of exhaustion and relief. "My girl," he said, approaching the bed. "How are you feeling today?" I could speak a little now, though each word was an effort. "Better, Dad," I replied with a weak smile. He sat beside me, taking my hand in his. There was a moment of silence, as if he were gathering courage for something. "Shah," he began, his voice trembling, "there's something I need to tell you. When you were in the coma, the doctors told us to prepare for the worst. That you probably wouldn't wake up, and if you did, you might have severe brain damage." I felt a lump in my throat. Seeing my dad, always so strong, on the verge of tears, broke my heart. "But look at you now," he continued, with a smile that didn't quite hide his emotion. "You're here, talking, recovering. It's a miracle, Shah. A true miracle." It was at that moment when I felt I had to share my experience. I needed him to know that I wasn't crazy, that what I had lived through was real. "Dad," I said, squeezing his hand, "I have to tell you something. Something that happened to me while I was away." I told him everything. About the blinding light, the celestial beings, the council that debated my fate. I told him about the unconditional love I felt, about how I could see the interconnection of all lives. As I spoke, I saw how his expression changed. At first, there was disbelief, then confusion, and finally, a mixture of amazement and concern. When I finished, there was a long silence. My heart was beating hard, fearing his reaction. Finally, he spoke. "Honey," he said cautiously, "don't you think that maybe it was a dream? Or perhaps something you saw on TV and your mind mixed it all together?" I felt as if I'd been doused with cold water. "No, Dad," I insisted. "It was real. More real than anything I've ever experienced before." I saw the doubt in his eyes, the effort to understand. "Shah," he said softly, "you went through something traumatic. The brain sometimes creates these experiences to protect itself." His words hurt more than any physical wound. How could he doubt something so profound, so transformative? You don't understand, I said, tears beginning to flow. This wasn't a dream or a hallucination. It was real, and it changed everything. My father, clearly uncomfortable, tried to change the subject. He talked about my recovery, about plans for when I left the hospital. But I wasn't listening anymore. I felt alone, misunderstood. That night, when everyone had gone and the room was quiet, I cried. I cried from the frustration of not being able to adequately express what I had experienced. I cried from the fear that no one would believe me. But then, in the midst of my desperation, I remembered the words of the being of light. Love is the most powerful force in the universe. Use it wisely. I understood that I didn't need everyone to understand my experience. What mattered was how I was going to live my life from that moment on. In the days and weeks that followed, as my body recovered, I made a decision. I wouldn't talk anymore about my near-death experience, at least not for now. Instead, I would focus on living according to what I had learned. I began to see the world differently. Every interaction, every gesture, every word had new meaning. I saw the light in the nurse's eyes, the love in my family's actions, the interconnection in every aspect of life. My recovery, which doctors had predicted would take months, progressed by leaps and bounds. Each day was a new miracle, a new opportunity to be grateful and to love. When I finally left the hospital, I felt like I was being reborn. The world seemed brighter, more alive. I knew I had a purpose, a mission, to share the love and light I had experienced. I didn't need everyone to believe my story. What mattered was that I knew the truth, and that truth would guide me in every step of my new life. As my parents' car drove away from the hospital, I looked out the window and smiled. The journey was just beginning, and I was ready to live it fully, with love, gratitude, and the certainty that, no matter what, we are all connected in this great web of life. Thank you, I whispered to the universe. I promise I'll make every moment count. And with that promise in my heart, I embarked on the next chapter of my life, transformed by a miracle that, though misunderstood by others, had changed my world forever.